My biggest regret after choosing family over love. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. I ruined my life the day I chose my family over Jamie. I was in my perfectly curated dining room when it hit me. The good china my mother insisted we put on our registry, the beige walls she said were timeless, the carefully arranged photos from a wedding that never felt like mine. It all blurred when my phone buzzed on the table, screen lighting up between the wine glasses. "Did you see?" my friend Priya had texted, followed by a link. I tapped it, expecting some meme or article. Instead, Jamie's face filled the screen. They were standing on a cliff at sunset, wind in their hair, that ridiculous half-smile I used to kiss away tugging at their mouth. The caption read, "Forever said yes." On their hand was a ring I didn't buy. For a moment, all I could hear was the clinking of cutlery from the kitchen, where my wife was plating dessert, humming some song from the radio. It was the life my mother, Elena, called secure. The life my brother, Daniel, said was the smart choice. The life I chose the night I told Jamie I couldn't go against my family. My thumb hovered over Jamie's name, still pinned to the top of our old messages. Years of silence, but the thread was there, like a fossil. I scrolled up through the ghosts of our past, screenshots of job offers, late-night confessions, stupid selfies from our tiny first apartment. I stopped at the last message I ever sent them. "I'm sorry. I can't do this to my family." Behind me, my wife called. "Alex, are you okay? You're really quiet." "I'm fine." I lied automatically, locking the screen and setting the phone face down. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure she could hear it. Priya's text blinked at the top of my mind. "Did you see?" I had seen, all right. I'd seen the life I could have had if I hadn't been a coward in my own skin. I took a breath, feeling 23 again, standing in my parents' living room with my heart in my hands, about to shatter it myself. Because that engagement post dragged me back to the night everything between us started. I met Jamie on a Tuesday, which still feels wrong somehow. Tuesdays are for grocery runs and boring meetings, not life-altering collisions. I was 23, fresh out of grad school, working a soul-dulling entry-level job at a marketing firm my mother had connections in. The office was all gray carpet and forced smiles. Jamie was the new UX designer, brought in to modernize our ancient systems. They walked into the conference room with a laptop under one arm and a coffee in the other, hair pulled back, eyes sharp and amused like they were already in on a joke the rest of us hadn't heard yet. They sat next to me, offering a small smile. "Hi, I'm Jamie. Are these meetings always this beige?" I snorted, louder than I meant to. A couple of heads turned. My cheeks burned. "Sorry. Yeah, beige is our core brand value, actually." Jamie grinned. "Good to know. I'll stop trying to introduce color." By lunch, we were sharing a table in the break room, complaining about office buzzwords and comparing terrible childhood hairstyles. For the first time in a long time, I forgot to worry about what my mother would think of my posture, my shirt, my life plan. Jamie listened like nothing about me was a performance, just me. A week later, when they suggested we grab drinks after work, the yes came out of my mouth before my anxiety could draft a pros and cons list. At the bar, over cheap beer and fries, I told them about my family, the big house in the suburbs, the unspoken rule that nothing messy or real was allowed to show. "So they already have your whole life mapped out?" Jamie asked, stirring their drink with a straw. "Pretty much," I said. "Stable job, respectable partner, kids who take piano and never talk back." Jamie tilted their head. "And what do you want?" No one had asked me that without attaching conditions. I opened my mouth and, for once, didn't have a script. That night, under dim bar lights, I realized Jamie felt less like a crush and more like the first honest question I'd ever been asked. My family's expectations were like wallpaper, ugly if you looked closely, but so constant you stopped noticing. Elena loved to say, "We didn't come all this way for you to throw it away on experiments." She meant careers, relationships, hobbies, anything that didn't fit neatly into her idea of success. Growing up, I watched Daniel follow the blueprint perfectly. He went into finance, married another good family girl, and bought a house 10 minutes from our parents. At every holiday dinner, Elena would toast to his accomplishments. My victories were nice, but always followed by, "Imagine what you could do if you focused." When I finally invited Jamie to a family dinner, I convinced myself it would be fine. They were kind, smart, and already liked by everyone at work. How bad could it be? Jamie even showed up with a bottle of wine and flowers for my mother, nerves hidden behind a practiced smile. Elena took the flowers, air-kissed Jamie's cheek, and said, "So you're in design?" The pause around the word felt like a wrinkle she couldn't smooth out. "UX design? Yes," Jamie replied. "I work with Alex on temporary contract work." Elena cut in, turning to me. "You know, darling, stability matters. Benefits, pension, those things count." "It's not temporary," I said, laughing too quickly. "They're full-time." Elena's smile tightened. "Of course. I'm just saying, at your age, it's better to think long-term." Daniel cleared his throat. "Mom, it's fine. Times have changed. People don't stay at one company forever anymore." She waved him off. "Easy for you to say. You're already established." Jamie's eyes met mine across the table. They didn't say anything, but I saw it. The tiny flinch, the note of hurt quickly swallowed. Later, as we cleared plates in the kitchen, Elena leaned close enough that only I could hear. "You're serious about this?" she asked, nodding toward the dining room where Jamie was laughing with Daniel. "Yes," I said too fast. She sighed. "Just remember, Alex, some choices are hard to undo. Don't be reckless." It sounded like concern, but it landed like a warning. I didn't know it yet, but that was the first time my mother quietly began building the case against the person I loved. The comments started small, little nudges disguised as jokes. Whenever Jamie couldn't make a family event because of a deadline, Elena would say, "Must be nice to have so much freedom," with a tight smile. If Jamie wore jeans instead of slacks, she'd murmur, "Casual, aren't they?" As if she'd found a stain on my shirt. In the beginning, I pushed back. "They're working late," I'd explain. "Their team relies on them." Or, "We were out all day. They didn't have time to change." But every defense I made got added to some invisible file my mother was compiling. Daniel stayed mostly neutral, which somehow hurt more. He'd shrug and say, "You know how Mom is," as if that were an immutable law of physics, not a behavior we could challenge. One Sunday, after Jamie left our brunch early to meet a client, Elena waited until the front door clicked shut before turning to me. "Do you really see yourself raising children with someone so unstable?" I blinked. "Unstable? They have a steady job." "I mean emotionally," she said, lowering her voice. "Artists are unpredictable." "They're not an artist, Mom. They're a designer." "Same thing," she dismissed. "You need someone reliable, not someone chasing inspiration or whatever they call it." That night, I told Jamie about it while we lay on our tiny apartment couch, legs tangled, a cheap candle sputtering on the coffee table. "Your mom doesn't have to like me," Jamie said softly, brushing hair from my forehead. "But she does need to respect you. And right now, she doesn't." "I'll talk to her," I promised, kissing their palm. "She'll come around." "She has to." Jamie hesitated. "Alex, what happens if she doesn't?" I swallowed, staring at the ceiling. "She will." But even as I said it, a knot formed in my stomach. Because I'd seen my mother cut people off over much less than me loving the wrong person. And the next time Elena brought up the subject, she didn't bother hiding the threat behind polite conversation. The ultimatum came on a rainy Thursday, the kind of day where everything feels heavier. I'd gone to my parents' house alone for dinner, hoping to keep things calm. Jamie had offered to come, but I said, "Let me handle it this time," trying to sound braver than I felt. Elena served roast chicken and poured wine with the practiced grace of someone hosting a diplomatic summit. We made small talk about work, Daniel's promotion, a neighbor's scandalous divorce. I waited for the turn, the moment when conversation shifted onto the tracks I feared. It arrived between dessert and coffee. "So," Elena said, setting her glass down with a soft clink, "have you thought any more about what we discussed?" My fork paused. "About what?" "About your future," she replied. "About Jamie." My chest tightened. "Yes, I've thought about it." Daniel shifted in his seat, eyes dipping to his plate. He knew what was coming. I could tell. Elena folded her hands. "I'm going to be very clear, Alex. This family has worked too hard to build a life with standards. Your relationship with Jamie does not fit into that. They are wrong for you." "Wrong how?" I asked, knuckles white around my fork. "They don't share our values," she said. "Their background, their instability, the way they challenge everything. You need someone who complements this family, not someone who undermines it." "That's not fair," I said, heat rising in my face. They challenge things because they care. She leaned forward, voice soft like a blade wrapped in velvet. If you stay with Jamie, you're choosing a path that leads away from us. We will not support that, financially or otherwise. The room went quiet. Rain tapped against the windows like a clock ticking down. Mom, Daniel said quietly, maybe that's a little. No, she snapped, eyes never leaving mine. He's old enough to make his own choices. And to live with them. I felt 16 again, cornered, desperate for approval I hated myself for needing. So what? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. If I don't break up with them, you'll cut me off? Elena's gaze hardened. You can't have both, Alex. It's us or Jamie. The worst part wasn't the threat. It was how quickly a part of me started trying to justify why maybe, just maybe, she was right. And the night I finally told Jamie the truth, I watched myself become the villain in my own story. I asked Jamie to meet me at the park where we'd had our first real date. It was petty, maybe, choosing a place already soaked in memories. But I felt like if I didn't have every possible advantage, familiar bench, familiar trees, familiar smell of damp earth, I wouldn't be able to go through with it. They arrived in a blue jacket I loved, cheeks pink from the cold. You sounded weird on the phone, Jamie said, sitting beside me. What's going on? My mouth went dry. I'd rehearsed this speech in my car, in the shower, in my parents' guest room, but now every word felt foreign and wrong. My mom, she gave me an ultimatum, I started. My family did. Jamie's face shifted, cautious. Okay, what kind? They said if I stay with you, they'll cut me off. I blurted, hating how small I sounded. No support, no help, nothing. Jamie's jaw tightened. Alex, I told you from day one, I don't want their money. It's not just money, I said. It's everything. My job, my place there, my relationship with them. They'll shut the door. Jamie looked at me for a long time, eyes searching mine. So what are you saying? The words came out like broken glass. I can't lose my family. Silence fell, thick and awful. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. Someone laughed on a nearby path. Life went on, indifferent. You won't lose them, Jamie said quietly. They're choosing to punish you for loving someone they don't control. That's not on you. I know, I said, even though I clearly didn't. But they're all I've ever had. And they're right that my life is tied up with them in ways I can't just undo. Jamie's eyes glistened. So where do I fit into that? My throat burned. I'm saying we should end this. Before it gets worse. Their breath hitched like I'd slapped them. Is that what you want? They asked, voice trembling. Or what Elena wants. I hesitated for half a second. That was all it took. The hurt in Jamie's eyes when I failed to answer that question honestly still haunts me every time I try to sleep. The breakup was messy in all the ways that don't show on Instagram. There were no dramatic storms or thrown glasses, just two people sitting on a splintered park bench, trying not to come apart in public. Jamie wiped their cheeks with the heels of their hands. I thought when you said you loved me, you meant it was us making choices together, they said. Not you and your mom against me. I do love you. I insisted, tears blurring the world. That's what makes this so hard. They shook their head. If you loved me the way I love you, this would be simple. Not easy, but simple. What does that even mean? I asked, panicked. It means you'd rather lose your parents than lose yourself, Jamie whispered. But you don't even know who you are without their approval, do you? Each word hit like a hammer. I wanted to argue, to list all the ways I'd been independent, but nothing came. Because deep down, I knew they were right. When it was over, Jamie stood up, shoulders shaking. One day, they said, voice raw, you're going to realize you didn't choose your family. You chose their fear, and you gave it my name. They walked away, leaving me on the bench with the rain starting to fall, soaking into my jeans, my skin, my resolve. I sat there until the streetlights blinked on, until my phone buzzed with a message from Elena. Did you do it? I stared at the question, thumbs hovering. Then I typed, yes. It's over. She replied with a heart emoji, and you'll see it was for the best. No acknowledgement of the person I'd just gutted out of my life. No acknowledgement of who I was without them. When I went home that night, my apartment felt like a stranger's place. Every mug, every blanket, every shared toothbrush reminding me I'd just turned our future into a ghost. And my family welcomed me back so quickly that I didn't realize the true cost until years later, when it was far too late to undo. They approved, life came together faster than I expected, like it had been waiting in a box labeled Alex, if obedient. Elena introduced me to people at her charity events, always steering me toward the same type, polished, polite, from families she already knew. Eventually, I started seeing one of them regularly. It didn't feel like falling in love. It felt like settling into a job you didn't hate enough to quit. We got married in a hotel ballroom with high ceilings and a string quartet. My mother cried in the front row, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief monogrammed with our initials. Daniel gave a toast about choosing wisely. No one mentioned that 6 years earlier, I had already chosen once, and that choice had been ripped out of my hands. My spouse, kind, decent, never really knowing the whole story, became part of the stage set. We had dinner with my parents every Sunday, hosted work colleagues, went on vacations that looked great in photos. In every picture, I looked like a man who had done everything right. But in the quiet moments, the cracks showed. I'd reach for a joke only Jamie would have understood and find silence instead. I'd hear a song we used to dance to in our kitchen and feel my chest tighten. Once, my spouse found me staring at an old ticket stub and asked, "You okay?" And I heard myself answer, "Just tired." Because the truth was too complicated to explain. Priya tried, gently, to hold up a mirror. "Over drinks one night," she said. "You laugh less now, you know that." "I'm just busier," I deflected. She studied me. "You used to talk about ideas. Now you talk about schedules." "It's called adulthood," I joked weakly. She sighed. "No, Alex. It's called shrinking." I brushed her off, insisting I was fine, that stability mattered more than sparks, that I was lucky. But deep down, a voice I'd smothered years ago started whispering that maybe this luck felt an awful lot like slow suffocation. And it wasn't until my family's perfect image began to fracture that I finally saw how little my sacrifice had truly meant to them. The first crack appeared when Elena landed in the hospital with a minor heart scare. It wasn't life-threatening, but it was enough to send the whole family into panic mode. I rushed there straight from work, Ty Askew, guilt already gnawing even though I hadn't done anything wrong. When I arrived, Daniel was pacing the hallway, phone glued to his ear. Inside the room, Elena sat propped up in bed, complaining about the food, hospital bracelet flashing every time she gestured dramatically. "I'm fine," she insisted as soon as she saw me. "They're overreacting. The doctor just wanted to run tests." I took her hand, feeling the papery fragility of her skin. "You scared us," I said. "You should slow down." She smiled faintly. "I can't. There's too much to manage." Then, as if remembering, she added, "Speaking of, did you hear about Daniel's new investment? It's going to be huge for the family." Later, in the hallway, I cornered Daniel. "New investment?" I asked. "What's that about?" He rubbed his temples. "Long story. Mom wanted to put some money into a friend's real estate project. I told her it was risky, but when has she ever listened?" "So you're managing it?" I pressed. "Trying," he muttered. "There's more going on with their finances than you know. They didn't want to stress you." Something in his tone made my stomach drop. "What does that mean?" He shook his head. "Not now? We'll talk later." We never did. Life swooped back in. Follow-up appointments, work deadlines, family dinners where Elena retold the story of her near-death experience, like it was a badge of honor. But the idea of more going on lodged in my mind like a splinter. One night, while helping my parents sort their mail, I saw an envelope marked past due tucked under a stack of charity invitations. I reached for it, but Elena's hand slapped over it faster than I thought she could move. "Just junk," she said tightly, snatching it away. "I'll handle it." Old habits kicked in, and I let it go. But that glimpse of something hidden behind the perfect family facade was enough to make me wonder how many other truths had been kept from me, and at what cost. The ghosts of my past didn't knock politely. They barged in through a notification. Months after Elena's scare, when things settled back into their careful routine, Priya sent me a screenshot. "Look who's on the panel at the conference next week," she wrote. Jamie's face stared back at me from the marketing for a design and ethics event my firm was sponsoring. Same sharp eyes, same steady half-smile, now framed by a title that made my chest twist. Head of Experience, Rivera and Company. "You're coming," Priya texted before I could formulate an excuse. "You owe yourself closure." Closure sounded like such a clean, manageable word for what I knew would feel like being hit by a train. But I went. I told myself it was professional curiosity, that it would be rude not to support the event, that I could stay in the back and slip out unnoticed. The auditorium buzzed with chatter as people found their seats. I took one near the aisle, heart thudding. When Jamie walked on stage, dressed in a simple black shirt and jeans, the room quieted. They carried themselves differently, more grounded, more certain. Like someone who had built a life brick by brick and finally trusted its foundation. As they spoke about designing systems that respected users' autonomy, every sentence felt like it carried a second meaning aimed directly at me. When you take away someone's choices, Jamie said, you're not protecting them. You're infantilizing them. Real care is about giving people the tools to choose, not choosing for them. My throat tightened. After the panel, I lingered near the exit, torn between fleeing and staying. I was halfway to the door when a familiar voice said, "Alex?" I turned. Jamie stood a few feet away, eyes wide, vulnerability flickering beneath their composed exterior. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "Hey," I managed. "Hey," they echoed. "It's been a while." We made small talk that felt like walking on broken glass. Jobs, the city, mutual colleagues. Eventually, Jamie glanced at my ring. "So," they said, voice carefully neutral, "looks like your mom got the future she wanted." I swallowed. "She got a future," I said. "I'm not sure it's the one I wanted." Jamie studied me for a painful beat. "And yet," they said softly, "you're still living in it." That conversation should have ended there, but Jamie suggested coffee, and I made the worst decision I'd made since the night I chose my family over them. We met at a cafe around the corner, neutral territory with too bright lighting and indie music humming in the background. Jamie ordered a black coffee. I got tea because my hands were already shaking. "So," Jamie said, stirring their drink, "why did you really come today?" "Priya sent me the link," I admitted. She thought, maybe it was time. "Time for what?" they asked. "To see what you gave up?" The bluntness made me flinch. "Maybe," I said, "or to see if I was right to let you go." Jamie leaned back, eyebrows raised. "You still think that might be true?" "I don't know what I think," I said, voice cracking. "I just know I can't stop thinking about you. About us." They sighed, some of the sharpness leaving their face. "Alex, I spent years trying to understand how you could say you loved me and still choose like that. I went to therapy. I replayed every conversation. Eventually, I realized it didn't matter why. The result was the same. I ended up alone." "I ended up alone too," I said quietly. "Just in a fuller house." We sat in silence for a moment. "Did you know your mother called me after we broke up?" Jamie asked suddenly. My head snapped up. "What?" "She called," they repeated. "She told me I'd ruined your focus, that you were finally back on track now. She thanked me for stepping aside gracefully." My stomach churned. "She never told me that." "Of course she didn't," Jamie said. "Why would she? The story works better if you think it was all your choice." Rage and shame tangled in my chest. I'd always suspected my mother had meddled, but hearing it laid out so plainly was like discovering a crime scene in a room you thought was safe. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "You didn't deserve that." Jamie's eyes softened, but only a little. "I know. The question is, what are you going to do with that information now?" I stared at the table, at the ring on my finger, at the life stacked on top of one catastrophic decision. Because for the first time, I realized someone had stolen my choice and then convinced me I'd given it away willingly. The confrontation with Elena had been brewing for years. Finding out about that phone call ignited it. I drove to my parents' house, adrenaline buzzing under my skin. The moment I walked in, Elena clocked my expression. "What's wrong?" she asked, closing the fridge. "You look terrible." "I saw Jamie today," I said, skipping the preamble. Her lips thinned. "Why on earth would you? And they told me you called them after we broke up." I continued. "That you thanked them for stepping aside. That you said I was back on track." For the first time in a long while, I saw something like panic flicker in her eyes. "They're twisting things," she said quickly. "You know how dramatic they can be." "Are they?" I shot back. "Did you call them or not?" She hesitated, then lifted her chin. "I might have called. I was worried about you." "You were worried about me, so you humiliated the person I loved and rewrote the story of what happened." My voice rose. "Do you have any idea how cruel that is?" Daniel appeared in the doorway, sensing the storm. "Hey, what's going on?" "Ask Mom," I said. "Ask her how much she interfered in my life behind my back." Elena's nostrils flared. "Everything I did was to protect you." To protect this family. Jamie was never going to fit. You'd have resented them when things got hard, and we couldn't help. Things are hard, I snapped. I'm miserable, Mom. I wake up every day in a life that feels like a costume you force me into. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Alex, maybe we should all calm down. No, I said, turning to him. Did you know she called Jamie? Did you know about the threats, the ultimatums? He looked away. I knew some of it. I told you she was serious. You told me to pick my battles, I said bitterly. Turns out, the battle was my whole life. Elena crossed her arms. You're being ungrateful. We gave you everything. You gave me conditions, I said. Love that only existed if I followed the script. That's not love, Mom. That's control. Her eyes flashed. You think you'd have survived without us? Without our support? I took a breath that felt like it scraped my lungs. For the first time, the idea of surviving without them didn't seem impossible. It seemed necessary. Walking away from my family wasn't a single dramatic exit. It was a series of small, painful choices. I started by skipping Sunday dinners, claiming work. When Elena called to guilt-trip me, I said, I need space, and didn't soften it with jokes or apologies. My spouse noticed the shift. You've been distant, they said one night, closing the bedroom door. Is something going on? I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the floor tilt. I've been lying to you, I said. Not about cheating, but about how our life got built. About how much my family pressured me. About someone I loved before. Their face fell, but they listened. I told them about Jamie, about the ultimatum, about the phone call I'd just learned about. I expected anger, and there was some, but not the kind I'd braced for. So they didn't just manipulate you, my spouse said softly. They manipulated us. They pushed you toward this marriage because it fit their picture. I don't know who I'd be without their fingerprints all over my decisions, I admitted. But I want to find out. We tried counseling. We tried renegotiating our relationship outside of my parents' shadow. In the end, though, we realized too much of our foundation was built on my fear, not mutual choice. The divorce was quiet, amicable, heartbreaking in a different way than losing Jamie. It was the death of a life neither of us had fully chosen. Elena called it a phase at first. Then came the threats, being cut out of wills, losing my position in the family business, rumors she spread to relatives about me, throwing everything away. I let her talk. I moved into a small apartment across town, took a job at a different firm, and started over with cheap furniture and a plant I kept forgetting to water. The loneliness was brutal. Holidays passed with awkward texts instead of gatherings. Friends picked sides or drifted away. Some nights, the silence felt so loud I wanted to crawl back, apologize, put the costume on again just to make it stop. But every time I considered it, I remembered Jamie's words on that bench. And the thought of betraying myself a second time finally began to feel worse than being alone. Healing wasn't a montage, it was a slog. I started therapy at Priya's insistence, sitting on an overstuffed chair while a stranger asked questions no one in my family ever had. When did you first learn that your needs were negotiable? She asked. I laughed, then cried, then realized I didn't know the answer. I picked up hobbies I'd abandoned because they hadn't fit the family image. I joined a community choir, even though Elena used to say singing was a distraction. I took long walks without my phone, letting the city noise drown out the chorus of my mother's opinions in my head. I thought about reaching out to Jamie properly, not just running into them by accident. Weeks turned into months as I rehearsed texts I never sent. What right did I have to knock on their life again, after everything? One evening, sitting at my tiny kitchen table, I wrote a letter instead. No expectations, no requests, just the truth. I told Jamie I'd finally learned about my mother's call, that I was sorry in ways I didn't have words for. I told them I'd left the life I'd chosen over them, not because I hoped to win them back, but because they'd been right. I couldn't live as a stranger to myself anymore. I mailed it and tried not to obsess over whether they'd respond. Days went by, then weeks. I told myself their silence was an answer, one I had to respect. Then, one rainy afternoon, there was a knock on my apartment door. When I opened it, Jamie stood there, holding a slightly crumpled envelope, my letter. They looked older, more grounded, still painfully familiar. Hi, they said. Can we talk? We sat on my hand-me-down couch, the plant wilting in the corner like a silent witness. I'm not here to rewrite history, Jamie said. I'm engaged. I have a life now. But your letter, it mattered. I needed to hear that you finally saw what happened. I do, I said, voice thick. I see it every day. They smiled sadly. Good. Don't forget it again. We talked for an hour. About therapy, about boundaries, about how love can be real and still not survive certain choices. When they left, my heart ached, but differently this time. Because for the first time, my regret felt like a foundation for change, not just a prison I was doomed to pace forever. Now, when I wake up in my small, messy apartment, there's no marble countertop, no curated gallery wall, no script waiting on the nightstand. There's just me, a chipped mug, and the quiet knowledge that every decision I make from here on out is mine. I still see my family sometimes, but on my terms. I meet Daniel for coffee away from our parents' house. He's more complicated than I gave him credit for, less loyal to Elena's worldview than scared of losing his place in it. Elena and I are distant. We've had tense conversations where she insists she did her best, and I tell her that her best hurt me more than anyone else ever has. She hasn't apologized, not really. I've stopped holding my breath waiting for it. Jamie got married last spring. I wasn't there. I wouldn't have expected to be, but Priya sent me a photo with my consent. Jamie looked radiant, happy in a way that made my chest ache and lift at the same time. I cried, then went to my choir rehearsal and sang until my throat hurt, letting the music carry some of the weight. If you're watching this because you're standing where I once stood, between the love that makes you feel like yourself and the family that taught you love is conditional, hear me clearly. Choosing yourself is not the same as abandoning them. But choosing only them at the cost of yourself will hollow you out until there's nothing left but resentment and regret. I can't go back and pick Jamie. That door is closed. I can't undo the years I spent living a life that felt like someone else's dream. What I can do is refuse to keep reenacting that choice in smaller ways. At work, with friends, in relationships where I'm tempted to shrink to keep the peace. My biggest regret isn't just that I chose my family over love. It's that I believed, for so long, that those were the only two options available to me. These days, my most hopeful moments are small. Making coffee in a kitchen I decorated myself, laughing off-key with the choir, saying no to invitations that don't feel right, saying yes to ones that scare me in a good way. And every morning, I ask myself one quiet question before the day begins. Am I finally willing to live a life that I would choose, even if no one ever claps for it?